So hi everybody, welcome to our panel session to flow or not to flow, when to use which automation tool. So I'm going to hand it over to Lilith and Raphael to take it from here.
Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. Our session indeed is to flow or not to flow, when to use which automation tool. And I think for us, it's you have so many awesome resources out there that really tell you, okay, look at this, and then kind of guide you through making a decision. But it's for me always a bit tricky to really understand what is really happening there. Sorry about that. So I think always, use cases, real life use cases are the ones that are most useful in just capturing how does this decision-making process work. And that's what we wanted to do. So thank you so much for joining. We have a few use cases ready.
Thank you very much indeed for this lovely intro, Lilith. So my name is Raphael Benizri. I'm a Salesforce senior consultant at Capgemini for the past 3 years. And at my client, I'm actually in charge of some, if not a lot, of their automations. We will deep dive in some of the tools they use. We will touch upon others, but let's carry on and see where this presentation leads us.
Yeah, and for sure we're going to try also to not talk too long. So maybe we have some time for questions at the end. So I will keep it brief already. So my name is Lilith van Biesen. I'm a Salesforce principal architect. I'm also a CTA, and I work also at Capgemini. We're actually in their offices. That's the ones that you're seeing behind us right now. And we're just very excited to be here and just dive in.
So as Lilith briefly mentioned that in the intro, we have indeed a lot of tools and a lot of automation possibilities with Salesforce. But if we look at the evolution of the tools that Salesforce has put to our disposal, thinking about workflow rules, which have been completely decommissioned, Process Builder, which is on their way of being decommissioned, we kind of remain with two major automation possibilities. So we either have the declarative option, which will go with flow, or the pro code option, which is code. So in code, you have Apex triggers, of course, you have Lightning Web Components, custom Lightning Web Components. But if we look at one of the major differences about the two, except of course being one declarative, the other one being pro code, we kind of have a first big difference in where does the magic happen? Where does this automation happen? Is it in the backend, or is it really user facing? So if we look at the flow, the before say flow trigger, after say flow trigger, and scheduled flow, the automation will really happen at the backend, as opposed to the screen flow, which is really by showing some screens to the customer, etc. So this will really happen on the front, on the user facing. And if we look at the pro code, code is kind of always in the back end. So speaks for itself that the code is happening on backend automation.
Yeah, so let's dive in. Let's give some examples and really understand how does this decision-making process work? What should we take into account? So we're going to start with an example of complex data entry. In a nutshell, what they want to do is they want to allow both creating and editing child records in one view. So our hypothetical company wants a clear view on their forecasted sales by their current and prospective customers. And to accommodate for this, they really want their sales users to enter large amounts of records while still having a consolidated overview of the pipeline, getting suggested values based on historical data, and seeing also, based on the values that they're entering, recalculations happening dynamically, so shown instantly. Okay, so that's the use case. Let's look at some of our options. We have out of the box. So if we would like to go out of the box, we need to complement it in this case with also a batch to create those draft records from the historical data. So that's already more than actually just out of the box. And even if we do that, you can see that it becomes a bit more cumbersome because you'll have more clicks. You won't have that consolidated overview that they were actually looking for. But on the other hand, you will have less implementation and maintenance effort. So in that sense, okay, there's some pros and cons. Let's go to flow. With Flow, we do not have dynamic recalculation or one view to create and edit records in one go. You will have some more implementation and maintenance effort than with the out-of-the-box option, but it will be less. And you will, of course, have reduced clicks compared to the first one. Now let's look at the Lightning Web Component. So here, of course, you'll have the most implementation and maintenance effort out of these options. But on the other hand, it will be completely dynamic and fit to purpose. Now that we've considered these, we have determined, Cody is already dancing, that custom Lightning Web Component wins for us here. So why? Well, because of the ease of use. We've mentioned that there's like large amounts of records, right? This means that this is going to take tremendous amount of time if they have to go and click through all of these out of the box. And even for Flow, it's not going to give them the right kind of use that they need. They won't get this overview. They won't get the real calculation. So for adoption, this is a real risk because they need to be able to do this in a very easy way. So those are the two main concerns, but the third is very important as well, and that is quality control. And I already know that I saw in the Q&A many saying something about, is Flow killing the developer role? Well, let's dive a bit more on that one. I don't think it is. And the reason why is that this quality control, if we look at very, very complex flows and the quality control you would normally do on such complex Apex logic, for example, it is just not feasible right now with Flow. You don't have the static code analysis tools that support this. And for also peer code review, it's really very tough to do this in a very controlled environment, to do this in the peer code review tooling, Git, etc., that you would like to do this in. So these were our reasons to go for this.
It is indeed, Lilith, as you say, when we look at the developer role, is it being killed by Flow? Indeed, but after our session and the use cases that we will dissect, I think it will become much clearer what Lilith just explained, and the developer role is really not on its way of disparition. It's really still an essential role within the community. I don't think that Flow will be able to replace a role like developer role. But let's dive into the next case. So for the next case, what we will look at is the conditional formatting. What we would like to have is a clear view of related records and their. If we really deep dive and give a concrete, tangible example, a company requires a clear view on clients' case. Sales users need to see an overview of all the cases with conditional formatting, and this based on the urgency, the status, for example, the age, and they need to take specific actions according to those criteria. So again, if we look at the tools that we have at our disposal, so we have, first one would be the out-of-the-box and Flow, which is a given, and it's also the first tool you got to think about. Like, can I develop something out of the box? Maybe there's no need in looking deeper or more complex, making something more complex than it already is. So if we look at the out-of-the-box and Flow, we see that there is a big limitation on advanced conditional styling. Not out of the box nor Flow really support advanced conditional styling, nor actions in a record collection. So this will be kind of tough to use for this use case. If we go a little bit more complex, we can have the custom Lightning Web Component, of course, but there again, we see this huge implementation or maintenance effort, which for this case might be overkill or not really necessary to go that much of an effort or maintenance. However, we do have reusability. And what I mean by that is you can kind of code or build a more generic Lightning Web Component, which you can then apply to other very similar use cases without too much effort. And of course, it's completely dynamic and fits to the purpose of this use case. But then if we don't want to put that much effort in implementation and maintenance, there is a third tool, which is OmniStudio. OmniStudio is a tool that has been put at our disposal by Salesforce in 2018. It has been acquired by Salesforce. It was Velocity previously. And it's a kind of tool set that we have, which is in between, I would say, in between flow and coding, if we look at complexity and
The skills, right?
exactly. Thank you, Lilith. I was losing my words. But the big no-go for that one, or the big, well, not no-go, but the big issue there is that it does require specific licenses. Other than that, the implementation and maintenance effort are relatively low. It's also reusable. So again, we can build Omni Studio solutions that are more generic and apply them to similar use cases. And they're very dynamic. They're easy to format. Dynamical formatting is possible, actions for specific states, etc. So it would really fit our use case here. So if I look at the tools and what we've just explained, I think I would personally pick Omni Studio. At my client, we do work with Omni Studio. It's really easy tool to use. Of course, it's easy of use. It's easy and intuitive, so the configurability of this tool is relatively easy for people to implement. And quality control is also possible with this tool. Of course, the consideration, again, is the external or extra licenses that need to be bought. So it's a consideration to be made when the use case actually is being put forward.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe to extend, you already explained Omni Studio very, very well. And I think just one additional maybe information or piece of data on that one is that, as you mentioned, is between Flow and Apex, or Flow and Code, because it's also kind of a low code development or tool set, right? Yeah.
Yes, correct. That is correct. Let's take a simple case, because we've had some complexity, we've had some semi-complexity. Let's go for easy. Why not? So we would like to create mirror records automatically. To be concrete, a company uses assets to keep track of their customer installed base after purchase. So what the sales users really want or need is that after an opportunity is closed on one, that the opportunity lines are automatically created into assets with specific information or field values that we can take from the opportunity line items. So here again, we have our flow, where the implementation and maintenance effort will be really, really low. It's pretty much a very straightforward case. The information is already available on the opportunity line items. So to really take this information and clone it onto assets should be very easy with Flow. It's also easy to extend. What I mean by that is, if I want tomorrow, I get some new fields on opportunity line items, which I also want to copy on the asset. It's very easy to just re-query those new fields and copy them to the new created asset. On the other hand, I have the extreme case for the custom Lightning web component, or the extreme tool. If we want to go overkill, we can go for that. The implementation and maintenance effort is considerably higher. What we could do to make it easier is we could increase the extensibility by configuring it as objects, and
we could use, for example, custom metadata types, right? So that we capture the mapping there, so that you code it almost once and then maintain it from there.
Correct. But still, the implementation and maintenance effort would still be considerably lower with Flow for that one. Omni Studio, of course, remains a possibility, but as we said before, you have those extra licenses. And for example, in this case, the customer doesn't want to pay for extra licenses. So we will go for Flow for their configurability, and the easy to extend are two big considerations that would make me tend to go for Flow instead of Lightning Web Components.
Okay, so now let's take a complex flow. Let's make it a bit more difficult again. Now we're not just going to clone records kind of one-on-one, but we're going several levels deep. So our company, our hypothetical company, uses opportunities with opportunity line items, with opportunity line item schedules. And when they have sales users who are working on a deal that maybe they've actually done such a deal before already for another customer, they want to clone an opportunity, but with all their related information, so that they can more easily clone, everything that they had set up there, which is quite a lot if you have opportunities and opportunity line items and opportunity line item schedules. So that's quite a bit of information to clone. Let's look at the options. So we have flow, but for flow, we know that there's a limited number of iterations. So here we would need to set up quite a few loops. So the chances of us running into these limits are real, right? I mean, maybe not in the first few cases, but as our company may become more complex, we could really run into some of these issues. So we need to keep that in mind. From scalability, there is a concern here. With regard to implementation and maintenance effort, it is not the hardest, but it's not that straightforward flow that Raphael was describing in the previous example. It's already a bit more complex than the previous one. And then, of course, flow, again, it will be easier to extend, because if you want to add fields, you can, in this case especially, add them quite easily. So that should not be an issue. So we still keep that benefit. But then if we look at Apex, of course, yeah, we know it's going to be a bit more implementation and maintenance effort for sure. Again, as you mentioned, we could use configurability or configurations to actually make it a bit easier on the maintenance, custom metadata types as an example. But what is our very big benefit for this particular use case of Apex here is that we can really optimize it to respect those limits. And that is why for us, Apex wins this one. So I'm sorry, Mark, we don't have a GIF of a dancing code yet. We'll think about that for our next session. But Apex wins, and we'll do a little dance because it's more scalable. And it has that quality control. So
Sure.
That's why in this case, we really want to keep that in mind here and go for Apex.
Totally agree. Let's go for a simple case again. A customer would like to, or a company uses stock market information via an external API to assess their customer scoring and potential. So what the sales users really want to do or need actually is to see the market price for their customer stock when they view the account page for the customer or of the customer. So if we look at flow, we are going to have this easy is a big word, but low implementation and maintenance effort. And the configurability through external services is possible by Flow. So Flow really supports via screen flow. I can call up on an API and show the necessary information that's required on my account page. On the other hand side, I've got my customer Lightning Web Component where the implementation and maintenance effort are much higher. But also there, it's completely dynamic. It fits my purpose. So it would be a possibility as well. So really here, my big concern or my big difference between the two is my implementation and maintenance effort. Am I willing to spend a lot on implementation and maintenance effort? Then yeah, go for a customer Lightning Web component. But typically a customer or a company would like to keep the costs as low as possible and not go for an extended amount of time. And we all know time is money, right? So I wouldn't go for a custom Lightning Web Component in this one. There's two other possibilities for this simple use case. Of course, Omni Studio, you would have guessed, but we can also do it via an external object. So if you have your external object, which connects to an endpoint, right? And with OData, if your endpoint, supports OData, then yeah, it's relatively simple to set up. But if your endpoint does not support OData, then you would need an integration layer in order to do a protocol conversion of that OData support in order to show the data that you need on your account page. However, both of them need extra licenses, which is also not always a given for your customer or your company. So again, for this one and this simple use case, I think I would go for a Flow.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go complex again, right? I mean, let's really challenge ourselves. So we are going for a complex external data case where, again, we want to bring in relevant data from an external data source. But this time, it's not really like one piece of information that we need to bring back. It's really very dynamic. So we have a company and they use energy prices. Well, I think we've all been talking a lot about energy prices recently. And they're actually using this energy price evaluations and fluctuations, which currently they can see on a dashboard on an external website, and they use this to really drive their pricing strategy. So what do the sales users need to see? Well, they need to see this dashboard on their opportunity, so that will allow them to set the right price for their opportunity. All right, so flow, well, even though, as you explained, we can call out to external, using external services to an endpoint, it doesn't have really that dashboard visualization capabilities that we would need. So that's a bit of a tricky one here. Custom Lightning Web Component, on the other hand, well, we've already mentioned these arguments, I think. So implementation and maintenance effort, yes, it's a bit higher. But again, it's completely dynamic and fit to purpose, which means in this case, you actually have multiple ways of setting this up in Custom Lightning Web Component. One could be that you're surfacing the visualization from the website in your Lightning Web Component, for example, via type of iframe. Or if you're bringing in the data, that would be a possibility too. And then you visualize it yourself via a particular, for example, JavaScript library, which supports this. However, if you're doing the second one, then CRM analytics might be a good fit as well. Again, additional license to keep in mind, but there again, this would be a possibility. However, we don't have a customer that wants to spend money. So we're going to go with the Lightning Web Component again because of the visualization needs. And then if we go to the sum of everything that we discussed, we have kind of like this wrap up, these takeaways. And Andy, Nix, you are way ahead of us. I will get to your point in a moment. But when you're thinking about the different kind of automation solutions that are out there, what are the considerations? What things should you keep in mind? So first of all, you have the visibility. Raphael already mentioned it at the first slide. Where is the magic happening, right? Is it visible to the user? Is it behind the scenes? That will, of course, impact also, what do we need to show and how, which tool can we use? And then the audience. This one is a really, really important one, because if you have an internal audience, if you have an internal user, you can mitigate some of the less optimal solutions that we have seen, some more out of the box, which may have more clicks. We can mitigate that through training, right? We can have really a very good training setup that explains everything very clearly, so that maybe it doesn't have to be quite as intuitive as a custom UI would be. So that is very important. On the other hand, if we look at, for example, customers, well, we can train our customers. Boy, we've tried, but yeah, you can't really set up a training with them and explain this is how our website works. If your website doesn't work, if it doesn't, it doesn't make sense to them, if it's not clear to them, they just will not use it. So you don't have this kind of luxury of saying, okay, maybe we go with the less optimal user interface and experience in this case. So audience is really, really crucial. And then again, the complexity. I think we saw this in all our use cases, that the complexity is a big factor in how do you want to set it up. Because even if you do some magic with custom metadata types or field sets or other kind of nice things, then still, the logic that you need to build around it is going to be quite tough. It's going to take a bit of time, and it's not going to be that easy to maintain and to have your quality control performed on in certain very complex flows. Dynamic. I think we've mentioned this one already a bit, right? So if there is really some interaction between the different elements in your UI expected, then again, maybe your flow isn't really the best one. But out of the box has done some work with dynamic forms that really, we've seen some improvements there. So on the other hand, dynamic form is getting way more dynamic. Well, it's in the name. But if you really need that, then maybe like a Lightning Web Component is more your thing. And finally, so the visuals, how strict are the UI needs? So again, if it's, carte blanche, if they don't really care that much, or it's a user that already is very used to working in Salesforce, that opens up our capabilities, let's say, of what we can do. But if it has to be pixel perfect, the styling is really, really important, then flow isn't always the easiest. Now I saw Toolkit pass by in the chat, so I think we'll definitely check that one out. Thank you for that suggestion. But still, I think there's other options which have more flexibility. Omni Studio also has more flexibility again than Flow on this. So what is our takeaway, and what is the reason that we put a cute little animal on this slide, other than because Mark asked us to? This is Cat Owl. Cat Owl is a hybrid of Photoshop love and mystery that, brings the best of two animals, cats and owls, together. And I think that's our main message here too. So hybrids rule. Andy, you were already ahead of us in saying this in the chat. If you can find, a good balance between the declarative and the pro code solutions, then that really is the best of both worlds. So indeed, if you have a use case in front of you and you really think about it, you can try and break it down into what are the different elements it needs to do, then maybe your answer is going to be hybrid. So I think
we're indeed coming to close of our presentation. If you have any more questions, or even if you don't have any questions, stay in touch. We've put our contact details here. You can reach out to Lilith over Twitter, LinkedIn, or to myself. But I see we still have some time, so maybe we can answer some questions in the chat already.
Yeah, no, let's do that. So first of all, yes, I'm all in favor of having a catbird as a new mascot.
I don't know what you mean.
Well,
Siri
Siri doesn't
know.
get it yet, but we will. Then Bobby, we see some questions on Omni Studio pricing. So I think, we're not account exec, so we don't have the full pricing. We did check, well, maybe disclaimer, forward-looking statement, or we're not Salesforce, so please check with your account exec. But based on the current knowledge that we have, Omni Studio usually is part of the verticals where it's sold in, right? So for example, you have public sector solutions, or energy and utilities, or all the different other ones that stem from the Velocity era, let's say.
Correct.
They have Omni Studio in them, so I'm not sure Omni Studio as a separate SKU is already on the market, or if they are planning to do so. We are eagerly awaiting for that to happen, but we'll see.
Indeed. That is correct. So indeed, currently, it's not sold as a separate SKU. It's indeed sold still historically like the verticals of Velocity. My own client at Capgemini is in the energy and utility, so they do have this package as well, and they do use Omni Studio for quite a bit. Is it an amazing tool that rules everything and that's used for everything? No. Again, let's go back to Cat Owl. Even for Omni Studio, there is a lot of hybrid. There's a lot of happening in the back end, whether it's coding or whether it's calling up on the flow or etc. So there is a lot of hybrid happening. I don't think, definitely after those use cases that we've briefly explained, or having studied the matter of flow, I don't think that I would be able, at least that's my personal opinion, to say that one tool is ready to take over everything. I think that hybrid is the way to go.
Yeah, so we should actually really push Salesforce to go for our catbird or cat owl mascot, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Sure.
So Vicky, if you have any connections, feel free to use them. All right, any other questions that you guys have? And gals? If not, yeah, I see that, I think it was quite clear, so that's good. Then we'll wrap up. I want to thank again Vicky and Mark for organizing, and of course all the amazing volunteers like Nadia who supported this session. So it's really, really cool. And then we'll see you likely in the chat of some other sessions, because the lineup is so amazing, right?
Sure.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Have a nice evening.
Have a nice evening.